Welcome to Spinning Back Clique Retweet here at MMA Junkie. We take a spin through the biggest headlines in the sport. This week we've got Nolan King, Mike Bond, and gorgeous George Garcia. So let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Gentlemen, this past week, Ciryl Gane became the first Frenchman to claim a UFC title, earning an interim heavyweight belt with a third-round TKO win over Derek Lewis. Now, some early betting lines actually have Gane favored over heavyweight champ Francis Ngannou in what looks like should be next, the unification match. But I got some questions about the whole situation. First of all, is this sudden out this performance alone, or was this a night where maybe Derek Lewis succumbed to the pressure a little bit in front of that hometown Houston crowd? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock and start it there. Nolan, get us going.
Well, I think it's a combination of both, but if I had to choose one, I think it was Ciryl Gane's night. I mean, I feel like that was quite the clinic he put on. If you had asked me, hey, how will this fight end if Ciryl Gane wins? I would have thought it would have been less of a powerful performance. I thought it would have been some point fighting. I thought it would have been really staying on the outside, using his jab, kind of what we saw out of him in the Rosenstruck fight, that sort of a matchup. But he kind of took that to the next level. Sure, the groundwork was the same. He still used his technical striking. He didn't try to get too overly aggressive, but he went for the kill. He was looking for finishes. He even kind of got a little bit reckless, I'd say, at the end, kind of really going for the kill against Derek, who can finish people when they get in those swang and bang sort of situations. So I think it was Ciryl Gane more than Derek. I mean, we know what Derek brings to the cage. We know what his weaknesses are. We know sometimes when he gets hit and he's hurt, he kind of has that MO of turtling. So I think it was definitely on Ciryl's. It was a strong performance from Ciryl rather than a weak one from Derek.
Yeah, I'd agree. I thought he looked fantastic. It's just interesting, right? Because I feel like people have been criticizing him for not being boring, and now one fight later, he's the favorite over Francis Ngannou. So it's interesting. Now, Mike, we know that the UFC and Francis Ngannou haven't exactly been on the same page lately. So I'm curious. I mean, does this unification fight happen next, or do you see other scenarios where maybe there's other fights that might even make more sense, that might be bigger? Are there other fights to make other than the unification fight?
Is there bigger fights? Yeah, I still think Francis Ngannou versus John Jones is the biggest fight, arguably, that can be made in the entire UFC, not just at heavyweight right now. But this is a damn good fight too, and it seems like everything is on track to make it happen. Francis Ngannou gave that interesting interview with Jimmy Smith the day before this fight on Friday, for the Saturday card, and he basically said, I know the position that I'm in. I know that there's been all these issues with the interim belt and getting this Jones fight done, and his own negotiation problems with the UFC and the spat that his manager or one of his representatives had with Dana over Instagram and stuff like that. But he said, ultimately, I am the heavyweight champion, and a champion defends his belt against the number one contender. I don't pick and choose my fights, these kind of things. So he's saying all the right things there. So I ultimately think this fight will come together. You saw Ngannou's tweet after the fight, "See you soon, boy," stealing a line from Yoel Romero there. So I think everything is kind of perfectly teed up to make this fight happen. I don't really see much getting in the way of it. Maybe if John Jones comes to the UFC and says, "Hey, I will take whatever you want to pay me to make this Ngannou fight happen right now," sure, maybe that changes things a bit. But right now, I don't see that happening. So all signs to me point to Ngannou versus Gane. It's the right fight to make. This is why he made an interim title. So I hope they follow through with that.
Yeah, I do too. I want to see that Jones fight at some point, but let's not leave this interim title hanging out there. George, you've been known to make a wager or two from time to time, so let me ask you about that line. Is Gane deserving of the favorite status here, and is he the man to beat Ngannou?
No, I would disagree with making him the favorite. He's looked great, man. Jairzinho, Volkov, Lewis. I mean, that's a murderer's row right there. But look, they're both awesome fighters. They're, to use the Olympics, I would say Ngannou's like the 100-meter sprint champion. He's the baddest man in the world, so he's the fastest man in the world. But Ciryl Gane isn't slow. I mean, he's probably the 400-meter champion. He just takes a little longer to do it, but he dismantles you. He picks you apart. What he did to Lewis was amazing with the hands. He had, some really nice elbows. Those kicks came into play. He utilized his reach. It was really, really tremendous. So I see why maybe the odds makers are leaning that way. But come on, go back and look at the trail of destruction that Francis Ngannou has laid out in these past few years. I think he should be the favorite. And my early pick right now is for him to put them hands on him.
I'll be honest, I was surprised with the line. I'm excited for the match, though. I can't wait to see it. And that's not even bringing in all the history between them and all the storyline, but just the stylistic fight should be incredible. That line did surprise me a little bit, though. Guys, also at UFC 265, Jose Aldo looked absolutely phenomenal in his continued bantamweight run. It's starting to look like a legitimate contender in that division. I know he had a title shot before, but now he's looking like he actually may deserve one. So lots of options on the table right now for his next fight as he wants to get in there. So let me know which matchup you think makes the most sense for Jose Aldo next. Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Mike, get us going.
By saying, I agree with everything you said there, John. He has looked sensational, and I think we need to give Peter Yan his flowers a little bit too here. The fact that he put it on Jose Aldo in that fight, and to me, that win is getting more and more impressive for Peter Yan. It's kind of unfortunate he had to derail all his momentum with the faux pas there against Aljamain Sterling that cost him his title, but to Jose Aldo, so many great fights for him at bantamweight. He kind of obviously had hit the limit at featherweight. There wasn't too many new compelling matchups for him there. So I really like this kind of fresh coat of paint. But I think the fight you have to do here is against the man who was calling the fight in the commentary booth, Dominic Cruz. This is a matchup I think people have been dreaming of. It didn't seem realistic back in the day when they were both WEC champions at the same time, came into the UFC. Were doing their own thing in those newly introduced weight classes. And now it seems like the timing is perfect. I feel like there's maybe not going to be too many more opportunities to do this fight. They're both coming off ranked, relevant wins. And I just think it makes all the sense in the world to put these two together and finally get what's probably been a long time dream matchup, just because I don't know how many more chances we're going to have to get with the stars will align. So I think that's a big fight to be made. Of course, Dominic Cruz is a little bit lower ranked, but we know what kind of guy he is. He wants to pick and choose his fights in terms of like big relevant ones. So to me, that's the clear way to go.
Boy, I like that, man. A lot of shared history there, like you said, dating all the way back to the WEC. George, what do you think? You like that one or you see something else?
Well, I have no problem with that matchmaking. Those are two WEC legends. So if that's what it winds up, I'm in. But, TJ Dillashaw scored so many points in that comeback win over Corey Sandhagen that some people say, hey, he might be next for Yan and Sterling. Just wait out your shot. That's you. That's all you, dog. But he also left that opening, that he would like to fight Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo reciprocated. So, as much as of a legend Cruz is at bantamweight, so is TJ Dillashaw. Having those two mix it up wouldn't be a bad thing. And like Mike Bond pointed out, Cruz is a little lower in the rankings. So Aldo's case to be a champion again gets stronger if he looks upward rather than downward. So again, both fights are great. I just think Aldo can hit a couple different check marks in his quest to be a champion again. And you can tell that's exactly what he wants to do, is be a champion again. He's got a 2-fight win streak. To add a third one and for that one to beat TJ Dillashaw, that would be tremendous.
Yeah, as long as the timing works out, I think that makes a lot of sense for Dillashaw as well, right? Like you said, maybe he's the number one contender, but if he really wants to convince people, a win like that would certainly convince. Nolan, what do you think, man? Is it one of those legends matchups, or is it one of these hot young contenders in that division, man? There's killers in that weight division.
Yeah, bantamweight's just surging right now, and I can't drop those matchups that Mike or George just dropped out. Drop those on my plate. I can't complain. I mean, Aldo versus Dominic Cruz, Aldo versus Dillashaw. Those are legend versus legend fights, but I'm not really sure if that's what I would go with right now at this exact point in time. I mean, for Dillashaw, that would be taking a step backwards. And sure, Aldo's a name. And sure, if he needs to fight again, then that might be a good matchup for him. It would probably be a headliner of a fight night or a co-main event of a pay-per-view. Would have a lot of eyes on it. But for me, I don't think that TJ Dillashaw needs that extra fight. I think he's positioned himself very well for the winner of Aljamain Sterling versus Peter Yan. And for Aldo, I don't think that taking a step backwards and fighting Cruz would really do as much as, my suggestion, which is fighting Rob Font. I think that Aldo versus Font could kind of be, the two fights down the line title eliminator, where you have Yan and Sterling fight each other. You have TJ fight the winner, and then Font versus Aldo would get the winner of that. So sure, there's Corey Sandhagen still at the top. Some people thought he won, so I think it won't take him long to get in the mix. But Aldo versus Font for a title contender, a title eliminator would be the fight that I would sign off on if I was a UFC matchmaker.
Man, that's actually a lot of fun, especially when you look at how good that boxing of Aldo looked in that fight. Man, he just continues to get better with the hands. Rob Font, we know what he brings in there as well. That'd be fun. A lot of great options, man. I guess a lot of it will just kind of come down to timing and what's available, but it's definitely going to be some fun fights in that division for, years to come at this point. Guys, another fighter confirming himself as a true title contender at UFC 265 was Vicente Luque, who looks like a real force at 170 pounds. Now, Luque laid out a case for his title shot after the win over Michael Chiesa, and Kamaru Usman at least acknowledge the discussion. Our own Danny Segura asked a question online that I wanted to pose to you now. At 10-1 in his past 11 fights, with 9 of those wins coming by way of stoppage and 3 straight performance bonuses, is Vicente Luque more deserving of a title shot than the man that's been waiting forever, Leon Edwards? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. George, get it started.
Boy, he presents a valid case, especially when you lay all that out, John, the way you did. He's popping. He was the last one to impress because Leon Edwards did get a win recently, but the finish wasn't impressive. The performance overall was pretty impressive, but the finish wasn't impressive. However, one of those numbers stands out. 10-1. One of those losses is to Edwards. In Edwards' streak, Edwards has his own 10-fight win streak. He had one no contest was the only blemish there against Bilal Muhammad. But other than that, he's been handling his business. The only problem is there's been these long lulls of inactivity, and fighters turning this down or him pulling out or whatever. But you can't argue with the results. He just hasn't lost. And after he beat Luque, during that time, Luque took another loss to Stephen Thompson. So that wouldn't sit too well with me for somebody that's already lost to the other fighter in question, which is Leon Edwards, to kind of catapult himself over. That said, it was worth the discussion because his performance on Saturday was incredible over Michael Chiesa. I did not predict that for sure. I predicted that he could win, but not in that fashion. So it's worth entertaining. And if it happens, okay. But I still think Leon Edwards is in the pole position.
Yeah, I guess, George, you grabbed the first argument against Vicente Luque right there, right? Like, hey, I beat you. So Leon Edwards can say, hey, that's it. But it was 4.5 years ago as well. So, Nolan, what do you think? Is that result from 4.5 years ago still enough to hold that position?
I think in most MMA contexts, no. But I also think the fact that Leon hasn't lost, like maybe. I think that, listening to Dana White after the fights on Saturday, he kind of said, well, Leon's only fought once in the last 2 years, and that's why he needs to fight again. But for me, it's like, it wasn't really his fault either. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't book him. He was delayed because of the pandemic. They gave him Hamzat, and then Hamzat couldn't fight, and then they kept pushing it, and they wouldn't reschedule him, and then they gave him Nate Diaz. So I think he's pretty much done everything that they've told him without much pushback. And so to kind of use the UFC's own plans against him when Leon doesn't really have much control is kind of an odd tactic. To me, I think that Leon should sit out, and I think he should get the winner. I think Vicente Luque has done a great job of making himself be in that discussion. I know the other guy at the top of that division is Gilbert Burns. I'm not sure that those two would want to fight each other as close as they are. So, regardless of that, I think that Luque should have to fight again. I think Leon should not. I think he's done more than enough. I think that the win streak is pretty legit, and the issues he's had with activity really haven't been too much in his control.
Yeah, I do hate to use the inactivity against him, especially when some of it boils down to COVID-19, but then there's all the other things going. I mean, I hate to use that against him. But listen, Luque is kind of the hot hand, and he finishes fights, right? Something that Leon struggles with a little bit sometimes. So what do you think, Mike? Is there a chance that Luque could leapfrog Edwards here?
It's just, I think, really hard to lay it out right now. I think these two made some great points there. And I think a lot of it could depend on what happens in this title fight. I mean, if Colby Covington beats Kamaru Usman, who's to say they don't try to run that back for a trilogy right away? I could very well see that happening. If Kamaru Usman wins, this guy's had a crazy year already. It'll be 3 title defenses from February to November. I could see him maybe wanting a bit of a layoff, in which case, does Leon Edwards want to wait another 6 months if he is that next contender to get that title shot? So maybe they book a Luque versus Edwards rematch, and we get to decide who gets that title shot by having them fight again. And then there's no questions to be asked at all here. So I think there's a lot of different ways we can go with it. I think both guys are kind of deserving in their own rights. That head-to-head win does mean a lot to me for Edwards. But again, I think a lot of it is really just going to hinge on what happens in this title fight.
Yeah, it's interesting, all those moving parts right now. I really don't hate the idea of a rematch, to be honest with you. I mean, it is a relevant fight. I know they've had it before, but it's been a long time. And like you said, I think it would answer a lot of questions. I don't hate that idea. I'm sure Leon probably hates the idea of it. He feels like he's been waiting long enough, but it's not a bad solution to try and figure it out and get a clear number one. Well, guys, looking ahead to this weekend, Bellator and PFL are going head-to-head on Friday night, so make sure you got your dual screen set up all ready to go. Now, both those main cards kick off at 9 p.m. Eastern. So here's the question. if the way it plays out, the main events wind up going head-to-head, which of your two screens has the audio turned up? Are we doing Gegard Mousasi versus John Salter at Bellator 264? Or are we going Ray Cooper versus Roy McDonald at the PFL playoff card? A lot of ways to take this. I mean, is it the fight that you want to see more? Maybe you got a broadcast team you like more. Which one's getting the luxury of the audio as they go head-to-head? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Nolan, get us started.
Well, I'm going to have to lean with Bellator 264, and not just because there'll be phenomenal on-site coverage at that event, but I think that Gegard Mousasi is the fighter to watch if you were to have the, line these four guys up. Which one are you most interested in watching? It would be Mousasi. I mean, his status at the, if you were to have unofficial world rankings, I think that he's probably the one that would be closest to number one on people's lists in terms of, relative to their division. I think Mousasi is still considered one of the best middleweights in the world. He hasn't fought yet in 2021. He's fighting a guy that's kind of an under-the-radar contender who people don't really know how good he is because he's only lost to champions. So John Salter, sure, he's not the biggest name, but I think it will be an interesting fight. And anytime you get to see Gegard Mousasi perform, I think you got to tune in. But PFL's got a great fight too. I think that's one of the more intriguing main events that they put on, Rory versus Ray Cooper. But I got to lean with Bellator here in New England.
Yeah, listen, I think Salter has been perennially underrated in his Bellator run, man. He's been putting together some solid results. And by the way, solid little subtle plug for your on-site coverage there for Bellator 264. All right, Mike, what do you think? Is that the fight to watch? Which one of these are you going to be dialed into most if they go off at the same time?
In Homer and me does have to stump for Rory McDonald here, so I will go with that one. I think this is a really, really important fight in the career of Rory McDonald. I thought, when this PFL season started, you'd probably say Ray Cooper versus Rory McDonald would be like the ideal dream final for the company and everything like that. And now we're getting it as a semifinal, largely because Rory McDonald got on the wrong end of arguably the robbery of the year against Gleason Tebow. So for him coming off that, how is he going to respond? Are we going to see a more aggressive Rory McDonald who's not going to want to leave anything into the hands of the judges so he doesn't experience what he had last time? So this is a really big fight for Rory. Obviously, he's been through a lot since leaving the UFC. I don't know if you could call his Bellator stint like a flop or anything like that. He did become the champion and everything like that, so it was great for him. But I don't think that time there went exactly perfectly in how people would expect it. And then when he went to PFL, I think people thought he was kind of a lock to maybe win that $1 million. But we're seeing that is not the case here. Obviously, the bad decision against Tebow, not his fault necessarily, but this is a lot weighing on him for that. So not only as the fellow Canadian, but as someone who's been following Rory McDonald's career from day one, I think this one is a really big fight for him. So I'll have my eyes locked on that.
Yeah, Mike clearly wanting to retain his Canadian passport here with that selection. But it is an interesting time for him, right? I mean, identical 22-7-1 career records. I almost thought that was a typo when I was looking at it earlier today. So interesting time for both of them. George, how about you? Which one are you going to be dialed into most come Friday night?
All right, so I'm the tiebreaker here. Great cases brought by both of these cats here. Listen, Gegard Mousasi is one of my favorite fighters of all time. He's done it at middleweight, light heavyweight. He's even gone up to heavyweight and fought. Check out the Mark Hunt fight. But his opponent, John Salter, he's not as well known, but this guy, I think he's like 18-3 and 17 finishes. And back to Gegard, of his 47 wins, he's finished like 38 of them. So I don't even think it's going to go to the judges. That's must-see TV right there. That said, I think I'm on McDonald and Ray Cooper. And trust me, they're all studs, man. But the reason here, guys, is because of Ray Cooper. It's the way he comes out and the way he stalks his opponent. I mean, he just wants to uncork his hands and put his paws on you and knock you unconscious. And, of course, with Roy McDonald, you could tell there's a little bit, we were able to talk to both guys on Junkie Radio, and you could tell that Ray McDonald he's not Roy McDonald's biggest fan, so he wants to make a statement that night. And great point by Mike Bond in terms of Roy McDonald. That Tebow fight, that probably lit a fire under him because he's patient, he gets down, but I think he's really going to have to up the ante on Friday night.
Yeah, two great main events there, and smart scheduling on these guys' parts to go head-to-head on Friday and avoid the behemoth that is Cage Fury Fighting Championships on Saturday night on UFC Fight Pass. Clearly, they don't want none of that. So, guys, it's still a month away, but we know now that Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler will serve as a main card contest at next month's UFC 266. Now, Diaz hasn't fought since January 2015. He hasn't picked up a win in his career since October of 2011, but he nevertheless remains one of the most popular figures in the sport. Now, the fight itself should be a fun one. It's a rematch of a classic fight that's more than, and get ready to feel old here, 17 years in the making. But what are we expecting from Diaz in his return? Do we need to temper our expectations a little bit? Or are we allowed to get super excited and expect something big? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Mike, get us going.
I think you can get super excited for the return of Nick Diaz. I mean, this is something we've been talking about for years and years. It's finally going to happen. I think they made the right matchmaking and running this back with Robbie Lawler. It's the kind of perfect storm, in my opinion. But do I know what to expect? I mean, not necessarily. I am very glad this fight is 5 rounds. I think that's kind of going to help it play out and give it the breathing room it needs, because I could see this being one of those fights like, you know, we've seen this in some other Legends matchups throughout the history of, you know, boxing, MMA. You're probably going to get moments where there's going to be some really exciting stuff, but I could see some moments where there's some, you know, dull action and kind of lulls in there as well. So I'm glad that it's 25 minutes instead of 15, because that's going to allow the fight to kind of have its storyline, have its narrative, and play out a little bit better here. Nick Diaz, I mean, I really don't know. This is a guy who, if you've kind of been hearing stuff behind the scenes with him during this break and the time he had up until, you know, the past few years, he was most definitely enjoying his time away from the sport, the money he had made. He was in Las Vegas, you know, doing his thing, partying every weekend. If you followed him on Instagram, this was no secret to anyone. So I wonder, you know, what kind of physical shape he is in. Has the time off, you know, allowed him to recover all that scar tissue that we've seen so many times, where he would get cut open by, you know, a breeze of wind? So there's a lot of questions about the state of Nick Diaz. And then, of course, you can look at Robbie Lawler and have some questions too. It's been a rough run for him since losing his title. So I think this is one where I know Robbie's kind of been in a state where he wanted something to get him really excited. And in my opinion, this is most definitely it. So I would hope that this will bring the A game out of Robbie Lawler, or whatever he has left in terms of that. And then with Nick Diaz, I mean, it is just an absolute wild card. Who knows if he goes in there and turns back the clock, or maybe we get some, you know, crazy kind of unusual performance like we got against Anderson Silva. It's just impossible to tell.
Dang, Mike, when I said 4 minutes, I meant for the whole team, not just for you. George, what do you think? Are you just getting excited for a one-off, or what are we going to see here?
They could wait another 17 years, and I'd watch part 3, you know, because then that's not to tip my hand and say I'm going to take Lawler. I still got to study this fight, but they're scrappers, man. They're fighters, you know. You can't miss these guys. I know that we look at, you know, them as also martial artists and athletes, but primarily to me, the core of both of these guys is they are fighters. And with Nick Diaz, he's just a show, man. Him and his brother have earned that. They're fun on fight week. They don't even say much at the press conference, but whatever they say, people react to it. And then once the fight starts, they get in your face. They talk to you. They talk smack, but they don't back down. So yeah, I'm all in. I'm glad Nick Diaz is finally back to fighting, and I hope this isn't just a one-off. But I'm really glad that these two warriors actually decided to lock horns after 17 years. I've kind of been wanting to watch this one. Every time you asked them about it, they both dismissed it. But I just knew in my heart it was going to happen again. I'm glad it is. And here in Vegas, too. Can't beat that.
George just dropped a gem there. He's not a showman. He's a show, man. All right, I like it. Nolan, what do you think? Are you getting fired up for this one or what?
Yeah, I love it. It's because they got the matchmaking right. You know, if they had brought in Nick and he had fought Hamzat or something, it would have been BS. But go back and watch the Spinning Back Clique archives. This is the fight that we did matchmaker a few times for the Diaz's. I thought Robbie Lawler versus Nick or Nate would have made all the sense in the world. And, you know, I'm sure there's a crowd of people that say, oh, Nick Diaz hasn't fought forever. He hasn't won forever. Sure, all that stuff's true. But at the end of the day, this is supposed to be entertaining, right? And anytime that the Diaz's fight, there's entertainment. It has that big fight feel. They can be 50 and still doing this, and they would draw eyes. And so for me, I'm not taking this too seriously. I don't know what the heck to expect, but I think it will be fun and it will be entertaining.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Nolan. That's the real big point of this all, right? I don't think we're expecting Nick Diaz to come back and be a title contender, right? We're just expecting him to come back and put on some great shows for everybody, and that's what we want to see, right? Those boys entertain. That's why they get 5-round fights even when nobody else is getting them. So I love it. Bring it on. Can't wait to see it. Well, still got a little bit of time for that, but this weekend it's PFL. It's Bellator. One championship is in action. Cage Fury Fighting Championship in action. We'll talk about it all next week on Spinning Back Clique.